Hey everybody, what's up? This is your girl Dragon, and it's time for another live help session. This is a live tutorial for the FCHQ Discord. What's up, you guys? This is going to be going to QRNE, and looks like he wants to create a basic automatic team balancing system. So that's what we're going to be going through today. And I'm going to tell you guys, it's quite a lot for a basic system. So if you are just getting into this, I hope that you're in for a ride. So let me first go over the structure, and then I can go through a series of play tests to show you guys what we're going to be putting together today. So when the players spawn in, there's going to be a timer that allows them to choose their teams. And what's up, Skylar? How are you doing? I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. Now, when a player chooses their team, and it's going to depend on which team they choose, there's going to be another timer that starts to check to see if there's enough player on each team. So I have two timers that go, one that checks for team 1 and one that checks for team 2. Now, team 1 goes first. If there's not enough players on team 1, any AFK player that's in the lobby that hasn't chosen a team will be switched to team 1. I'm so sorry to hear that. I do hope you feel better, Skylar. And then if once team 1 is full, it's going to then check for team 2 and then place players on team 2. Once that's done, it's going to check to make sure there's enough players on each team before the game starts. And then once there's enough players on each team, there will be a clock that will start and the game will load and the players will be teleported. So that's the basic structure of the game. And this structure was basically something that QRNE wanted in the FCHQ Discord. So looks like they want to have a max team of 4 players per team, and they want at least 3 players on the team. Now, when I was putting together this tutorial for QRNE, there was an issue. What if, let's say, one player chooses team 1 and the other player remains AFK? Well, remember, team 1 in this structure is going to check first and balance out first. So that AFK player is going to be switched to team 1. And now we have 2 players on team 1 and 0 players on team 2. So this was an issue, and I'm quite sure since he wanted the setup this way, he might come across this issue. So what I did to fix that was basically to have this double checker to make sure there's enough players on each team before they're teleported to the game area. If there's more players on this team compared to the other, the game will not start and they'll get a pop-up message that says, hey, there's not enough opponents on the team. Do you want us to try again? Once they try again, everything resets and they can pick their teams. So now that you know the structure, let me go ahead and run through the series of play tests and you can see what I mean. So let's get into it. Let's do it. All right, players have a chance to choose their teams. So I'm going to show you the first example here. If I choose team 1, again, team 1 is going to go first in this in this balancing check. And you're going to see that team, the AFK player is going to be switching to team 1. Now there's not enough players for them to battle. And you can see now it's assigning team 2. And there's nobody on team 2. There's not enough players to send them to the game. So everything's going to reset. They're going to go back to global team and get a chance to pick their teams. Once players pick their teams, it's still going to go through the same process. It's just like a loop. And once the checks are good, it's going to start a timer that says game is loading. So you're going to see that here. Game will begin to load because there's enough players in the game. You can always add like an in-between timer or alert in there that says enough players in the game, let's get started, or whatever you want to do. That'll be kind of cool. And just go for that. Now players will be teleported to the game and they can play and do whatever they want. Now let's see what happens when it maxes out. So let's go ahead and set this to a count of 1. And this to a count of 1. And by maxing out, meaning that what happens if the max amount of players choose one team. Let's watch the system balance it out and assign the AFK player to team 2. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and choose team 1. And you're going to see it's going to disable that checker because it's maxed out. Now it's going to continue the process. And right now we have an AFK player. They're not going to choose anything. And you're going to see here, assigning team 1. Team 1's maxed out, nothing to do there. So it's going to assign them to team 2. Now the game will load and the players will teleport to the game area because there's enough players or opponents for each team. Awesome. All right, let's try another scenario and then we can jump into the settings. All right, so I'm trying to think of what other scenarios can I do here. Let's see here. So I'm going to go ahead and put it at a max of 4 players. Right, and let's do team 2. So let's put team 2 at a max of 1 and equal if you're 2, 1 player. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and choose team 2. It's maxed out and you can see the checker has been disabled. Other player is AFK. And then the last test I'll do is players are not AFK and they each choose a team. All right, so now assigning team 2. Other player is now on team 1. And there's enough players in the game, so it's going to go ahead and load up. And players are teleported to the game. Awesome, let's go ahead and test out the last scenario. And this scenario is going to be when both players choose a team. So let me go ahead and put it back at a max of 4 and equal to fewer 3 players. All right, and we have player choose team and player choose team. Now it's still going to try to balance it out, but since these players have been switched to a different class, it won't affect them. It only affects the AFK classes. All right, there's enough players on each team, and then they're going to be teleported to the game area. Awesome. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the settings Again, thank you guys for joining up on this live tutorial. Live and unedited. So first we need to go through what devices you're going to need, right? So let's go ahead and start with that. You're going to need one, 2, 3, 4 Mutator Zones. Of course, your player spawner pads for as many players as that's going to be in your game. Let's see here. In addition to that, you're going to need your team inventory and setting devices for each team. I have one here for global, team 1 and team 2. You're going to need 3 class selectors for each team. I have a class selector for global. And I totally saw that poll, I'm so sorry. And a class selector for team 1 and a class selector for team 2. Hey, sorry to hear that, Skylar. Skylar's in the chat chilling. I really appreciate that. So again, that's 3 class selectors. In addition to that, you're going to need quite a few player counters. Now, QRNE in the chat, I did tell you that you need 2 player counters for the system. I did see your video, and it looks like you were still just using 1, so I'm not quite sure, but you can see how the 2 player counters work in the system. So you're going to need 2, 1 for display and 1 for the balancer for each team. In addition to that, you're going to need 2 more. You're going to need 2 more, and you're going to place those in your game area. And these are going to be to check to make sure there's enough players before they are teleported to the game. All right, let's see here. You're going to need timers. So you're going to need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 timers. And I think I got everything. I really think I do. Let me see. I think that's it. Oh, and I have a round settings device. And I'm so sorry, I did forget one thing. You need teleporters. Oops, sorry about that. You're going to need teleporters and a pop-up dialog device. All right, now that you know everything that you need, let's dive into the settings. Now, to follow along with this tutorial, I do highly recommend that you name your devices exactly the same so that there's no confusion. We're going to start with, let's see here. Let's start with the round setting device. All right, so you're going to name your round settings device T20, and I have that for tutorial 20. And these are the settings for the round settings device. Now there's no functions, but I do have it set to hide and disable the pop-up dialog device because it was kind of showing up at the beginning of the game, even though I had it set to not start or show up when game start. So this is a fail-safe, and if you're having that same issue, then you can use the round settings device to take care of that issue. So here you can see I have pop-up dialog device T20, no player on team, to hide and to disable. All right, next let's move on to the class selector T20 global. Again, that's the class selector T20 global, and these are the settings. For functions, we're going to change player to team and class when receiving from the player spawn pads. And also Mutator Zone device T20 reset. This is when they press the reset button, and this zone will activate to change the players back to the global team and class. Now you can also use a channel device for this if you prefer, so be sure to experiment. If you want your teams to show up on your scoreboard, then you're going to need to use a team setting and inventory device. For my global team, I have it set to team settings inventory T20 global, and these are the settings. Again, these are very basic here, so just kind of go through that. It's a bunch of don't overrides, but if you want to adjust that, if you want the global team to have any special instances, be sure to do that. And for events, there's nothing. For functions, there's nothing. All right, team 1 is just basically for the name of the team, again, to show up on the scoreboard. So again, I have it named Team 1, and I set the color in an icon, and the default class is 1. And again, everything else down here is personal preference. All right, so let's go through that. No functions, no events. Team 2 is exactly the same. And you want to make sure it's a default class of 1. All right, let's see here. And if I went through that too fast, let me just go back up here. Again, Team 2 is also a default class of 1. All right, and then everything else is personal preference. All right, and no functions, no events. All right, that takes care of that. Let's go ahead and jump into player spawners. All right, so I have player spawner 1, and it's named player spawner T20P1 for player 1. I have it enabled during phase always. Player team is 1. The class is any, and it is set to island start and so forth. For events, we're going to send an event to the teleporter T20 team 1 to enable. So there's one of the names for the teleporters. We're also going to change the player to team and class, and this is the global team and class. And I have it set also to hide the pop-up dialog box because, like I said, it was kind of just showing up all the time. So I just have all these safety precautions to make sure that it's hidden. And then we're also going to enable teleporter T20 team 2 in the game area. So this is basically setting up those devices so the players can get into the game. All right, and then for player spawner team 2, or player 2, these are the settings. So it's team any, class any, and so forth. And when the player is spawned, you're going to change them to team and class. And then of course I have the pop-up dialog box to hide. If you have more than 2 players, of course, in your game, you're going to copy this particular pad right here, and you're going to duplicate these and put as many of these as you like. Leave team 1 independent. There will always be one player that spawns into the game, and this particular pad can be very beneficial for activating and enabling devices to get your game started. All right, let's see next. Let's jump into Mutator Zones. Why not? We got Mutator Zone device T20 Balancer Team 2. So basically this is the device that will basically assign Team 2 in the process of balancing teams. So let's go ahead and check that out. It is enabled on phase none and so forth. The selected team is 4, and this is because when players spawn in, they're going to be on a global team of 4. And you only want this device to affect the players that have not chosen a team. So you want to make sure you put that global team here. The class is any and so forth. All right, and then for functions, we're going to disable when receiving from the Mutator Zone T20, reset when player entering zone. So we'll get to that Mutator Zone here in a bit. It's the one at the very top. We're also going to disable when receiving from the player counter T20 Team 2 display when the count succeeds. This means that when that particular team, which is Team 2, hits max players, it's going to disable this device so that it no longer needs to balance out the teams. We're going to enable when receiving from player counter T20 Team 2 balancer when the count succeeds. Again, that's player counter T20 Team 2 balancer when the count succeeds. For events, when player entering zone, we're going to send an event to the class selector T20 Team 2 to change the player to team and class. All right. Now we have Team 1 right here on top. And the name of that is Mutator Zone Device T20 Balancer Team 1. And here are the settings. Again, it is at a selected team of 4. That way it only affects that AFK team, that global team. And for functions, we're going to disable when receiving from player counter T20 Team 1 display when the count succeeds. And Mutator Zone Device T20 reset when the player has entered the zone. We're going to enable when receiving from player counter T20 Team 1 balancer on count succeeds. And for events on player entering zone, we're going to send an event to the class selector T20 Team 1 to change player to team and class. Again, very important to name your devices, very similar to this tutorial, so that when you set things up, everything syncs exactly the way it is in the tutorial. All right, moving on to the next Mutator Zone. Mutator Zone Device T20 Teleport. When all the checks have succeeded, this will be enabled when the game starts. So we have it enabled on phase none and so forth. It is selected team any, selected class of any. And so forth. We're going to disable when receiving from pop-up dialog device T20 no player on team when responding to button 1. This is when the game resets and there's no players on an opponent's team. They get that pop-up box. When they press button 1, it's going to disable this teleport device or teleport to Mutator Zone. All right, we're going to enable though when receiving from timer device T20 loading on success. And we're also going to enable when receiving from channel T20 teleport enabler. Okay, now this one I do have to remove. I had a channel device here. I have it set to on receive transmit. So if you are using a channel device, you can see this is what it will look like if you're using that. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it here, but it's not really active in this particular process in the playtest that I just shown you because the device itself is not transmitting anything. All right, and then we have Mutator Zone device T20 reset. Again, selected class of any and selected class of, selected team of any and selected class of 1. This is because team 1 and team 2 is both going to be changed to class 1, and you only want it to affect that class. Alrighty, and then let's see here. For functions, we're going to enable when receiving from the pop-up dialog device T20 no player on team when responding to button 1. For events, when the player has entered the zone, we're going to do quite a bit here. We're going to change them to the global class, so class selector T20 global, and we're changing the player to team and class. We're also going to disable 2 mutator zones. We're going to disable the Mutator Zone device T20 balancer for team 1 and disable the Mutator Zone device T20 balancer for team 2. All right. All right, so we got Mutator Zones, we did player spawner pads, we did the global class and so forth. Let's go ahead and move on to the very important parts. Here is the balancing system. So let's first start with the class selector. It's named Class Selector T20 Team 1. And we're switching to Class 1 and Team 1. Activating team is the global team, Team 4. And this is very important because this allows the players to not select multiple teams. So let's say, for instance, a player selects Team 1. Then they won't be able to select Team 2 as well because they're going to be on a different class and a different team. They'll no longer be on the global team of 4, and it will not allow them to get onto Team 2. So that's really important to set this to the global class or the global team. All right, and let's see here. For functions, we're going to change player to team and class when receiving from the Mutator Zone T20 balancer, team 1 when the player entering zone. For events, on team switched, we're going to send an event to the player counter T20 team 1 balancer to register the player. We're also going to register, let's see here, player counter T20 team 1 display to register the player. And then we're also going to register them on the player counter T20 game starter team 1 to register the player. What that basically means is when they run into this zone, they're going to be registered to this player counter, registered to this player counter, and registered to this player counter over here for team 1. That way everything stays right on track. All right, and then let's see here. And sorry, I'm on console, so sometimes that definitely happens. All right, and that does it for events. All right, let's move on to the display. So usually this is going to go right on top like this, right? And I have it to the side. You can see it's set like this. But I have it to the side so that you can better see it. So we have it set to equal to 4 players and so forth. Again, this is only going to count team 1, so that's important to place, and count class 1. And I'm going to go through this really slow. As far as spectators, this can actually be set to no without this affecting the system. And I would highly advise that you do set it to no, because even if they're eliminated and they're spectating, unless you still want them to be counted towards the team, you can leave it on yes, but if you don't, you can set it on no. So it really just depends on what you want to do and what your game mode requires. All right, we're going to compare players to target when receiving from player counter T20, team 1 display on player counted, meaning that when a player is counted on this device, it's going to compare to target. And this should already be binded from the class selector. But we have register player when receiving from class selector T20, team 1 on team switched, and player counter T20, team 1, display on player counted. So that's this device registering the player as well. Now, when they reset everything, we want to make sure we unregister the player when receiving from the pop-up dialog when they press button 1. And as a fail-safe, just go ahead and unregister all players. Same exact thing. Pop-up dialog device T20, no players on team, button 1. All right, let's move on to events. So for events on count succeeds, we're going to send an event to player counter T20, team 1 balancer to disable, and Mutator Zone device T20 balancer team 1 to disable. All right, so we're disabling the player counter as well as the Mutator Zone device when the count succeeds. All right, and then on player counted, we're going to send an event to player counter T20 team 1 display, compare targets players to target, and then player counter T20 team 1 display, register player. Again, that should be actually binded from the other side. All right, now let's move on to the player counter T20 team 1 balancer. All right, we're doing equal or fewer than 3 players. And this is per request of QRNE in the FCHQ Discord. We're not going to compare at game start, and we're not going to compare on count change because we're using signals only to compare the target. All right, and then count at team 1, class of 1, and so forth. And sorry, I might need some water because lots of talking today. All right, compare players to target when receiving from player counter T20, team 2 balancer on count fails. And timer device T20 main on success. We're going to enable when receiving from pop-up dialog device T20, no players on team when responding to button 1. So we want to make sure we re-enable this device so that it can basically, continue the loop. However, we're going to disable it when receiving from player counter T20 team 1. Display when the count succeeds. So that basically means when this count, the display count is maxed out and there's this like team is full of players, there will be no need to balance it out. So it's going to disable this device. And then we're going to jump into registering the player when receiving from class selector T20 team 1 on team switched. We're going to unregister player when receiving from pop-up dialog device T20, no player on team when responding to button 1, and unregister all players when receiving from device T20, no player on team when responding to button 1. For events on count succeeds, we're going to send an event to Mutator Zone device T20 balancer team 1 enable. On count fails, send an event to player counter T20 team 2 balancer, compare players to target. Again, using this device to compare the player counter for team 2 to target, and we're going to get to that here in a bit. All right, let's move on to team 2. So I'm going to go ahead and move this out the way. There we go. And let's start with the class selector. We have class selector team or T20 team 2. And we're switching to class 1 and team of 2. Activating team of 4, which is the global team. And here are the settings. We're changing player to team and class when receiving from the Mutator Zone device T20, and that's the T20 balancer for team 2 on player entering zone. And for events on team switch, we're going to send an event to the player counter T20 team 2 balancer to register the player. We're also going to register them to the player counter T20 team 2 display. And let's go ahead and register them to the player counter T20 game starter team 2. All right, awesome. Let's go ahead and move on to player counter T20 team 2 display. We're going to do equal to 4 players, and we are comparing on count change. Signal only, counted team of 2, counted class of 1, and so forth. And let's go into registering the player, class selector T20 team 2 on team switched, and player counter T20 team 2 display on player counted. We're going to unregister when receiving an event from the pop-up dialog device T20, no player on team on responding to button 1, and go ahead and echo that for unregister all players when responding to button 1 on the same pop-up dialog device. For events on count succeeds, we're going to send an event to player counter T20 team 2 balancer to disable a Mutator Zone device T20 balancer team 2 to disable. Just want to make sure you see the entire name there. All right, on player counter, we're going to send an event to player counter T20 team 2 display to register player. All right, and let's move on to the player counter T20 team 2 balancer. All right, we're doing equal or fewer than 3 players, and so forth. Counted team of 2, counted class of 1. All right, and for functions, compare players to target when receiving from player counter T20, team 1 balancer on count fails. Timer device T20 balancer on success, and this again is for team 1. We're going to disable when receiving from player counter T20 team 2 display on count succeeds. And let's jump into registering player when receiving from class selector T20 team 2 on team switched. Unregister player when receiving from pop-up dialog device T20, no player on team responding to button 1. And we're going to echo that exactly the same for the same pop-up device on responding to button 1. All right, awesome. Now that we have all that, let's move on to the timers. So the first timer is timer device T20 main. This is the timer that reflects to the players that they need to choose their teams. You can set it to whatever duration you like. I have it set to 15 seconds with a name of choose teams, and it's counting down and so forth. The running text is choose your teams. It is showing on HUD. All right, and then let's see here. We're going to start when receiving from the pop-up dialog device, T20, no player on team when responding to button 1. Now, keep in mind here, you might notice that this also is set to start at game start. All right, so once it completes itself, it's going to reset and prepare to start again once they choose to start over on the game. All right, cool. For events, on success, we're going to send an event to the player counter T20 Team 1 balancer, compare players to target, timer device T20 balancer, and that's Team 1 to start. And we're going to enable the pop-up dialog device T20 no player on team to enable. That will begin the cycle. Now let's go to the next timer in line. Once this is successful, it's going to enable this timer here, which is the timer device T20 balancer team 1. Right, so you can see that right here. And this is going to basically give a little buffer so it can assign teams. You can, of course, reduce this time if you feel like it. So you can see here I have it set to assign team 1 with a duration of 5 seconds. It is not going to start at game start and so forth. Timer running text is assigning team 1. It will show on HUD. All right, cool. And then we're going to start when receiving from timer device T20 main on success and nothing else there. And for events, we're going to send an event to, let's see here, the player counter T20 team 2 balancer to compare players to target. And then timer device T20 balancer team 2 to start, which is this one right here. And the duration is 5 seconds. It's assigned team 2 and so forth. Timer running text is assigning team 2. All right, and start when receiving from timer device T20 balancer team 1 on success, which should already be binded. And then for events on success, an event to timer device T20 checker to start. And that device is right here. You see we're kind of moving in a line here. Timer device T20 checker. So this is only going for 3 seconds, all right? And it's named checker. This is basically when it checks to make sure there's enough players in the game before it teleports them to the game area. All right, I do have it to show on HUD, but you can set it to no if you like. It's up to you. We're going to start when receiving from timer device T20 balancer team 2 on success. All right, and then on success, we're going to send an event to the player counter T20 game starter team 1 to compare players to target. So let me get a drink of water here real quick, and I'm going to show you what that is. One moment. All right, so this is going to start the checking process to ensure there's enough players in the game before they're teleported here. So that's going to be this player counter right here, right? It's going to basically compare players to target once that 3-second timer counts down. So the name of this player counter is player counter T20 game starter team 1. And these are the settings. We're going to be checking for equal or more than one player and so forth. The counted team is 1 and the class is 1. And we're not including spectators and so forth, right? And then again, this should be binded already. So just so you can see that again, timer device T20 checker on success. It's going to compare players to target. And then we're also going to register player when receiving from class selector T20 team 1 on team switched, and that should already be binded. When the count succeeds, we're going to actually send an event to the next portion of this setup, and that's player counter T20 game starter team 2 to compare players to target. Now, on this device, if the count fails, we're going to send an event to show the pop-up dialog device. And I have it set here as a duplicate show and then show to all. And that's as a fail-safe because sometimes you never know what will happen. Now, if this count succeeds, we're going to move over to this player counter here for team 2. So player counter T20 game starter team 2, equal or more than one player and so forth. Counted team of 2, counted class of 1. And then compare players to target when receiving from player counter T20 game starter team 1 on count succeeds. Register player when receiving from class selector T20 team 2 on team switched. On count succeeds, we're going to send an event to timer device T20 loading to start. On count fails, we're going to send an event to timer device, pop-up device T20. No players on team to show. And then show to all for the pop-up dialog device as a fail-safe. You want to make sure it shows to all players that's in the lobby once this is happening. All right, let's move on to the pop-up. So the title is no players on opponent team. And you can select whatever content alignment you like. For description, we got want to try again. And auto display is never. We have one button response type and no dialog timeout. This is important. All right, and for button text, we got OK. You can put whatever you want there, and so forth. All right, we're going to show when receiving from player counter T20 game starter team 1 and team 2 on count fails. And we're going to hide when receiving from player spawner T20 player 1 and all your player spawners here when the player is spawned. I also have it set for round settings when the round starts. And then let's see here, pop-up dialog device T20. When they press button 1, we also want to hide this box. All right, that's in case if you're having issues and it's still showing up. This is one way you can ensure that it does not show up. And by that, I mean like it doesn't show up when it's not supposed to, right? Enable when receiving from timer device T20 main on success. I do hope you feel better, Skylar. Please get well soon, and thank you so much for hanging out. I really appreciate it. You have a wonderful day and get lots of rest and sleep. We're going to enable when receiving from timer device T20 main on success, and disable when receiving from Mutator Zone device, and that's going to be the Q global reset on player entering zone, and round settings T20 on round start. We're going to show to all when receiving from player counter T20 game start, and that's the game starter. Team 1 on count fails and team 2 on count fails. So that's both player counters T20 game starter, team 1 and team 2 on count fails. We're going to hide from all when receiving from pop-up dialog device T20. No players on team when responding to button 1. Right, let's move on to events where we're going to unregister the players. So when they respond to button 1, we're going to send an event to player counter T20 team 2 balancer, and we're going to unregister the player. And then we're also going to unregister all players at the same time on the same device. Again, this should automatically be binded if you have all your devices set up prior to doing your bindings. Timer device T20 main is going to start again, and player counter T20 team 1 balancer is going to enable. Player counter T20 team 1 balancer. We're going to unregister player counter T20 team 1 balancer. We're going to unregister all players. So it's kind of a duplicate there. And player counter T20 team 2 display. We're going to unregister player. And player counter T20 team 2 display. We're going to unregister all players. Mutator Zone device T20 teleport, and that's the teleport or Mutator Zone that teleports them to this area. We're going to disable that, and then we're going to also unregister the player from player counter T20 team 1 display, and player counter T20 team 1 display unregister all players. So again, you see how that is the same. Mutator Zone device team 20 reset, we're going to enable, and some of these should already be binded for you, so just make sure that you're good to go. Pop-up dialog device T20, no players on team, we're going to hide. So we're going to go ahead and hide this when they press that button, and then hide all again when they press that button. All right, and that's again responding to button 1, the pop-up dialog device T20, no player on team to hide, and hide from all. All right, now that that's good, teleporters, you want to make sure your teleporters are assigned to the team players. So we have teleporter T20 team 1. It's selected team of 1 and class of any. And enable when receiving from the player spawner for player 1 when player spawned. And again, that's the player spawner pad that's marked for team 1. Teleport when receiving from Mutator Zone device T20 teleport on player entering zone. Activate when receiving from Mutator Zone device T20 teleport on player entering zone. And there's no events. For Team 2's teleporter, we got teleporter T20 Team 2. And these are the settings. Again, it's select a team of 2 and select the class of any. Enable when receiving from player spawn or T20 P1 on player spawn. Again, that's the first player spawn pad marked as Team 1. And teleport when receiving from Mutator Zone device T20 teleport on player entering zone. Activate when receiving from Mutator Zone device T20 teleport on player entering zone. And there's no events. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the last thing, I think. And that's the loading timer here. Timer device T20 loading. So once all that's checked out, we're going to start the game. So I have it set to 15 seconds and I have game loading and so forth. The running text is game loading. We're going to show on HUD. And we're going to start when receiving from player counter T20 game starter team 2 when the count succeeds. And there's no more functions. And then for events, we're going to send an event on success to Mutator Zone device T20 teleport to enable. And that's it. I believe I covered everything, and it's a pretty massive tutorial. I'm not sure if I should call it basic. Maybe it should be intermediate automatic team balancing system. You know what? I did forget something. Game settings. All right. This is important as well. You want to ensure that your structure is set up appropriately, because if you don't have enough teams there, the system will not work. So I have it set to a max player of 16. You want to make sure this fits the amount of players that are going to be in your game. And what's also important is the teams, right? I have it set to teams of 5. We have 3 teams in this map, and I have an extra team in case I wanted to do something else with this. So make sure you have enough teams set. Team size will be dynamic, and you want to set whatever rounds you need. Class settings is also very important. You want your default class to be class 4, which is your global team. So make sure you have that as well. And those are the important settings for your island settings. But that does it for this tutorial. I do hope it helps out. And I hope that it's able to help not only just QRNE, or hopefully I could say his name correct, QRNE in the FCHQ Discord. Dude, I hope this helps you out. But if anyone else is checking out this tutorial, I do hope you find some benefit in it as well and be able to integrate it into your own projects. All right, that's going to do it for this tutorial. And I guess I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye.